you for tuning in to another episode of The Culture, episode 152. We're still celebrating Black History Month, and we have a very special guest today to help us continue to do that. This gentleman needs no introduction. He is a professor of cinema and media studies. He is a renowned speaker, an in-demand television commentator, a critically acclaimed author. His new book actually just came out. I got my copy. Rappers Deluxe, How Hip-Hop Made the World. I'll put that up on the screen so everybody can see it. Make sure y'all go cop that. And he's written, 7 books now? He's the one and only hip-hop professor at the University of Southern California. He is known as, or they call him, the Notorious PhD, the incomparable Dr. Todd Boyd. Thank you for coming on, brother. How can I get an autographed copy? How can I send this to you and get this autograph, man?
Where you at,
this book
man?
Is beautiful.
Where you at? You in New York?
No, we in New Jersey.
New Jersey. Man, we'll have to figure something out. Next time I'm out that way.
This book is beautiful, man.
Oh, thank you.
I like everything about it. I'm ready to dive into it.
Thank you.
Yeah, but let's get going, man. Can you introduce yourself to our audience? I mean, you need no introduction, but just give us a brief summary to our listeners.
Dr. Todd Boyd, sometimes known as Notorious PhD. This is actually my 8th book, and dropped a couple weeks back, and we're out here making the rounds, trying to promote it so that everybody knows it's available, and encouraging people to cop and check it out, and get into what I tried to put down in the book.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this book and yourself as a guest is like the physical embodiment of, what this podcast is. Because, you represent the culture, and the things you talk about is the same things that we talk about on this podcast. The culture, the genre, hip-hop, racism, a little bit of sports, and we try to tie it all together. Tell us a little bit about, what made you write this book. I know you've been writing it for a few years now.
I mean, I've been telling people, as I'm doing the rounds, promoting it, I've been telling people that I actually started writing this book when I was 9 years old. I just didn't realize it. I was 9 years old the year Kool Herc threw the legendary party that we identify as the beginning of hip hop, and
yep.
The images from that era, the music, film, sports, overall culture, and everything after it was with me, and has been with me all these years. I mean, I actually started writing it back in, I think, 2021. The year gets fuzzy. But I think the thing that's important is, we've been talking about 50 years of hip hop, and, 50 years is a long time. That's not a trend or a fad. You don't have 50-year trends or 50-year fads. When you're around for 50 years, that's substantial. And I feel like, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I couldn't have written this book. I needed everything to transpire and play out the way it has in order to write it. So, here we are. I mean, maybe year 51 now. But, even beyond that, when I started writing the book, I wasn't necessarily thinking about 50 years. At some point in the process, I think I realized it would kind of coincide with that. But the story of hip-hop is one that's unfolded from the 70s and 80s, 90s, and we cover all this in the book from the beginning, to the present, and try and give you the fact that this is half a century. This is half a century, and there's a lot of substance there, and I want people to come away from it recognizing this is epic. And you need to understand those 50 years to understand how epic it really is.
Yeah, for sure, no doubt. I mean, we're going to jump around. We got a lot of topics to discuss. Talking about 50 years of hip-hop, what can you tell us about, where the culture is going when considering where it came from? You created the academic study of hip-hop, others teach hip hop. KRS-One is the first person that comes to mind because I know he teaches it in universities and so forth. But you're the first one, correct?
Yeah, as far as I know. I mean, I think, what I often say about this is, I come from the culture. There may be other people who, by this time, are doing their thing, but I'm the first one to come out of the culture,
Right.
And, I was emceeing back when MCs were expected to, get the crowd hype. I'm an OG in this, so I'm a few years before Rakim started bringing the poetry to the bars. So I don't have bars for you like that. But
I was about to say, you're going to give us a couple bars, 16?
Nah, I ain't got them kind of bars for you because I'm actually before that time, but I have utmost respect for it. But, everything I talk about in the book, I mean, particularly in the early chapters, the book is broken up into 5 chapters, starting with the 70s, ending with the 2010s and beyond to where we are now. But, everything I talk about in the book, I lived it. I experienced it. I'm familiar with it. I know about it. And I was doing this, 20 years before I became a professor, before I finished graduate school, got my PhD and started, doing my thing. USC School of Cinematic Arts, dealing with popular culture, film, music, television, sports, fashion, art, all that. So what I give you in the book is personal. It's also professional. And I think that's what makes it unique is, back in the early 90s when I started at USC right after the LA riots, people were looking at me crazy, when I was talking about hip hop in a college class. People looking at me real funny. Now it's different. 30 years later, people can appreciate it in ways that they couldn't back then. For me, it was all about what I had lived, but also what I studied, what I researched, what I observed, what I wrote about. And hitting it at those 2 levels, as I say, I think is what makes it unique because it's personal, but it's also professional. And you don't find too many people, if any, who have come about it, and certainly not before I was doing it back then.
Yeah, I mean, I'm what these I wouldn't say the younger kids would call an old head. My playlist is going to have mostly 80s and 90s rap and stuff like that. So I wanted to ask you, how has the genre changed from its inception in the 70s to what it is now? And has it changed for the better, in your opinion?
I mean, I think it has changed substantially. For the 70s, if you think about it, and this is what I talk about in the book, for much of the 70s, unless you were, in the Bronx or in Queens, or unless you were on the scene, you didn't hear the music. You had to be there and participate in it. But then, once the music is available on the radio, you can hear it anywhere. And then later when videos, start to blow up, you can see it. And so, I think that's a big difference. I remember the first time I heard Rapper's Delight. Then I heard Curtis Blow. I was in high school when this music came out. Everybody I knew was digging Rapper's Delight, and I was on Kurt Blow. And I liked Christmas rapping better than I did the breaks. And then, when Sugar Hill came back with Apache and Sequence, I mean, I remember all this, vividly, before we get to Bambaataa and, Grandmaster Flash, DMC. I'm in college by this point. So, I've been there since before it started. And I remember particularly everybody was getting off on, Michael Jackson and Prince, early 90s, and I'm trying to listen to DMC. So, thinking about it from that perspective and having observed it, I mean, as I mentioned, Rakim came with the poetry, a cat like Big Daddy Kane, NWA, Ice Cube, my guy Chuck D and Public Enemy. So I mean, if you ask me what I'm putting on my list, a lot of it's gonna come from that era. But by the '90s, everything blew up. Big and Pac and Nas and Wu-Tang, Jay-Z. I mean, Puff. I mean, Outkast. I mean, just every decade, you got these new artists who were doing their thing and kind of building on what came before it. And then, you get up to the present, and I'm like, I listen to a lot of these young cats and can appreciate what they're doing. I respect it.
I can't put a finger on what to call this era. Because, it started off with the party rap and hyping up the crowd and hyping up your DJ. Then it went to more lyrical with Rakim and them. Then it went to social commentary. And then it went to the gangster rap, which was an offshoot of the social commentary. Then we have the 90s. It was back to lyrical and storytelling. But now I don't know what to call this without dissing it, without insulting it, without calling it mumble rap. I don't know what to call this era. I guess this is the vibe era. That's what the young kids would call it.
I mean, I try to be tolerant, I think is the word I would use. What I recognize is at my age now, I'm not the target audience. So I don't want to dismiss what is intended for somebody else. But as a longtime participant and observer of the culture, I mean, I hear a cat like Drake. I hear a cat like J. Cole. I mean, J. Cole's got bars, whatever era he's in. It's like, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like the NBA. If you could hoop, you could hoop. And, you might be part of one era or another, but a great hooper can fit in any era. And they had the ability to adapt to the circumstances of that era. So, I don't know what people are doing now specifically. I feel like a lot of what happened before, like I say in the book, when you get to the 4th chapter of the book and you're talking about the 2000s, hip-hop helped elect a president, I mean, Obama's very much part of what hip-hop and its impact, had on America. And when you do that, like, what else is there to do after? It's like we helped elect a president. So now you have Kendrick Lamar winning a Pulitzer Prize, Nas performing with the National Symphony Orchestra at the Kennedy Center, Jay and Beyonce in a Tiffany's commercial with a Basquiat, Swiss Beats and Alicia Keys with their art collection. People are talking about buying paintings as opposed to buying cars and sneakers. So it's like whatever's going on now is cool.
Nas with his investments.
Yeah. I mean, we could list there's a whole long list of things we could mention of how, the game, like Big said, went from ashy to classic. Like where we are now is like so much farther than where we started. And so I feel like this younger generation, it's time for them to like do their thing, but they have a great foundation from which to do it. I'm from the era when the foundation was being built, so it's a different perspective.
Yeah, I wanted to read a quote that you gave to the publication The Wrap regarding your book, where you said, this book is about the culture, the music is part of the culture, is the frame that you sort of see everything through, but it's also movies, fashion, language, politics, sports, and art. I was interested in all these connections beyond the music. And I'm glad you mentioned the NBA because I wanted to tell. We just had the All-Star Weekend that just passed, and it wasn't recently. It was a couple of years ago. You had mentioned on the Rich Eisen show the importance of MJ. And speaking of Michael Jordan in his documentary, speaking about, he spoke about the George Floyd incident, and we all know that Jordan never really spoke on social issues ever. And so I wanted to ask you, how important is it for some of these athletes, especially black athletes, to speak out about social and cultural issues? Because I feel like LeBron right now for this era, he's that guy that speaks up. When we was coming up, we didn't have a guy like that.
I mean, I look at it in terms of generation. Jordan's a year older than me. We were in college at the same time. And I think for a lot of people back then, I mean, Jordan was in a unique position. But, I think the thinking at the time was, if you look at it, you sort of pull back. You have Muhammad Ali and John Carlos and Tommy Smith. You have that generation. Michael Jordan represents a different generation, and LeBron represents a different generation from that. And I think we are all products of our generation in a way. The thinking at the time, when Michael was in the mix was, don't do anything that's going to interfere with your bag, so to speak.
Right. You want to sell them sneakers.
Yeah. And, I don't know if that really aged well. And I think even he realizes it when it comes up now. He even says in The Last Dance, I was selfish, and I recognize I was selfish. I think this is what he said. I think he recognizes now, maybe at the time that made sense, but it doesn't age well. And perhaps if given the opportunity for a, redo, he might have approached it differently. Or maybe not, but you're not going to get no redo. So this is why we talk about it. I think in that generation, the thing was, as I say, like, do what you can to get your bag. LeBron's part of a different generation. Michael got a bag. I mean, the generation before us, you're talking Kareem, Dr. J, was altogether different. I mean, it hadn't been that long that the game had been integrated, relatively speaking. So the further you get away from that, I think the more freedom you have. And LeBron's generation is in a position where they have stood out and spoken up. And, I mean, go back to the bubble, during COVID and everything. There were guys who wanted to lead a bubble to go and, participate in those George Floyd protests. So I have a great deal of respect, for what LeBron is doing. Honestly, I think Mike might have got a bad rap. I can understand it from a generational perspective. I just think, sometimes you say things in the moment and you have no idea how they're going to age. And that statement about Republicans buy Nikes too didn't age well. But, a lot of people at the time felt the same way that he did. They just didn't have the resources.
And since we're in the topic of sneakers, Trump dropped his new Never Surrender, but I call them the Air Force Trumps. And there's a Fox News contributor, Fox News, a gentleman by the name of Raymond Arroyo. And I want to get into the topic of racism, and you let me know, both of y'all let me know if this is racist. Because he goes, his exact comment was, this is connecting with Black America because they love sneakers. He said this is a big deal, certainly in the inner city. So when you have Trump roll out his sneaker line, they're like, wait a minute, this is cool. He's reaching them on a level that defies and is above politics. The culture always trumps politics. And Trump understands culture like no politician I've ever seen. So when I first read that, I was like, all right, this sounds a little racist.
It's certainly ignorant.
Very ignorant.
I mean, I saw on social media earlier today, I saw several people post that. Several people. And I honestly just kept laughing. Because when I saw the shoes, I think maybe the day before, I kept thinking Tom Ford wants his T back. If you look at them, you can see where that
I didn't even think of that.
graphic design for that T comes from.
Yep.
I mean, look, I'm a sneakerhead. I'm an OG sneakerhead. I've been doing it since '74. So, I like sneakers, and I know a lot of other people that like sneakers. I don't think that's necessarily bad, but you can't just come up with any kind of corny ass sneaker and think that
buy
because you like I just kept looking at the shoe. I'm like, ain't nobody rocking these. I mean, maybe if the design on the sneakers was cool, people might rock them, but people in the sneakerhead community can be harsh critics. They don't like every sneaker that comes out. So it's like not just about, he's got a sneaker. Is your sneaker cool? And is it something that somebody's going to wear? But I think what dude was saying was really ignorant because, Black people in the inner city, they like sneakers. And Trump did this, so now Trump's going to appeal to them. I mean, that just indicates that he knows nothing about the culture, and he's basing his opinion on a stereotype, and he's uninformed. I mean, and I'm sure if we could see what he had on his feet when he said that he had trash on his feet. So, I wouldn't listen to somebody like that because clearly he doesn't know what he's talking about.
And even then, the people that may or may not have that mentality are probably not even old enough to vote, right? The people that are going to vote, I want to know what your policies are. How can you help my community?
And also, even if your sneakers were cool, you're going to vote for somebody because their sneakers are cool? Voting and cool sneakers are two different things. And if that's all it's going to take to get somebody to vote for you, then, the election would have been decided a long time ago. It's much deeper than that. That's why I keep saying the statement it's just ignorant. And honestly, it's so ignorant, I don't really need to spend that much time explaining how ignorant it really is.
Facts. So, staying on racist topics, I have up here this, I don't know if any of you saw this, I call it the racist permission slip out of Miami-Dade County Public Schools. And it says, students will participate and listen to a book written by an African-American, and the parent has to sign. This is an actual permission slip. The parent has to sign to allow their student to listen to a book written by a black man.
Yeah, I saw this. I saw this the other day.
And right away, I tweeted something out. I said, this is the racism that's going on in 2024 still.
Yeah, you have to get a form. You have to get a form signed in order to listen to a black speaker. I mean, this was so ridiculous when I saw it. I just kept thinking there's got to be more to the story. Maybe there isn't, but I just kept thinking this is just too dumb. But it is Florida, and the governor of Florida is he's on one. So maybe it is as simple as it looks, but I mean, the question is, okay, you have to sign a piece of paper in order for your kid to hear a black speaker. That makes no sense to me.
See,
and
Jeff,
Go ahead.
Hold up, Jeff. We had this conversation all the time. You always ask me every time. We always have a little segment like, is this racist? And I always try to explain to you, you're confusing racism with, I guess you can say, stupidity. Like, ignorance, we're being cute about it. Like, because, you ever, like, okay, you know how you talking about the Trump seekers a few moments ago? You ever seen Above the Rim?
Yes, I love that movie. They were actually giving it a couple days ago.
Right. So, there's a part when Marlon Wayans plays Boogaloo. He comes out to the court with that gold jumpsuit, trying to hoop. Like, that's what them sneakers remind me of. Like, they was clowning them wearing that. You're not going to see anybody in the streets wearing those sneakers ever. Like Dr. Boyd said, there's no swag to them. Like, you do some ghosts on something, American flag and a tee, and they're like, oh man, this is really going to capitalize on the black fan base. No, it's not how it works. Even the person who spoke up after it, he's just preaching to his audience. He's not talking to black people. So I'm not going to waste my energy getting offended by it, because, like, I know you're not talking about me. You're speaking to a particular base that's going to be like, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Black people like sneakers. That means they like sneakers. They'll like Trump. If they like Trump, they'll vote for him. It's not that kind of simple through line from one point to another, but they believe so. Even with this, you're saying that I need a permission slip to hear the words of a black person. If you say it out loud, you realize how dumb it sounds. But, like, okay, what is distinctive about this person's voice from that person's voice? Because they're speaking. How do you know that they're black? Like, there's no reflection of it at all, but they think it's a good idea. And the fact that they are giving this to children, and, like, you're sending it to parents, and there's no pushback from the parents, like, this is a bad idea. Like, there are parents signing off on it. It speaks to a deeper problem that's systemic in our society, not just this. But again, it's Florida, and you talk about Trump, he's in Mar-a-Lago. So it all kind of like leaks together. Again, don't confuse racism with stupidity. They're very close cousins, but it ain't that. This is just dumb.
Amen. But I bring up racism because I wanted to pose the question, has racism played a role, whether big or small, in helping hip-hop grow? You know, you go back to the 90s when David Stern from an NBA wanted to put the dress code because guys like Allen Iverson, you know, were rocking too much gold or the baggy pants and the do-rags and whatever it was. And, you know, they were considered thugs and whatever, the gangsters and whatever. So he wanted them to be, you know, more clean cut and wear a suit while you're sitting on the bench and whatever. And, you know, I'm not saying he was racist, but I'm saying this stuff causes a backlash and a reaction that, you know, makes change ultimately. So do y'all think that racism has had any type of effect in helping hip-hop grow?
I mean, you know, I think that example of the dress code is interesting because if you watch an NBA game now, you know, you're going to watch people walking into the arena and they're going to be talking about their fit. You know, I mean, on social media, every game now, there are going to be pictures of people in their fit, which is kind of funny to me because back, you know, in the early 2000s, cats were rocking throwback jerseys and everything was like really oversized, baggy jeans and, you know, 8X white tees and that whole era, you know, when everything was super baggy. And that's when the dress code was proposed. I mean, you know, I like fashion, so honestly, I never really had that much of a problem with the dress code because you're basically trying to say, clean up your act, you're on television, we want a certain standard. And I think, you know, there are jobs throughout society that have dress codes. So I didn't necessarily think that was racist. It was clearly intended to, you know, help sort of get rid of a certain look, and that look was directly associated with hip-hop. But as I say, if you look at it now, everybody's trying to rep, you know, everybody's trying to show off their fit. And if you go back to the era before that, I mean, we were talking about Jordan earlier, but, you know, I remember when Isaiah and Magic and Michael Jordan and Pat Riley were on the cover of GQ magazine. Grant Hill, you know, they were clean. Like, back in that era.
Clyde Frazier with the suits.
Yeah, exactly. Clyde Frazier with that 70s flair. You know, Dr. J, you know, with the fro. I mean, so, you know, the styles change and the players, I think, you know, represent their era. But that piece of it, in and of itself, I didn't really have a issue with because I understood what he was trying to do. And I think what we see now kind of affirms that point because everybody now is, you know, PJ Tucker is like, you know, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. So many guys now want to be known for their fit. Kuzma. So it's just kind of interesting how that played out.
Yeah, and before I move on from this, I wanted to touch on this topic. Me and Ant have this argument all the time. He's going to laugh when I mention it.
Oh, you going to start this shit?
Because I wanted to ask you your thoughts on Eminem, and is he a valued member or just a guest, as somebody like Lord Jamar would have you believe?
Go ahead, Doctor.
Of the culture.
You got it, Doc. You got it, Doc.
And I'm going to tell you where this stems from.
Okay.
Dr. Boyd. This stems from every time I ask somebody of color to give me their top 5, never, 100% of the time, they never have Eminem in it. So I posed the question to Ant, why is that? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a black and white thing? You know what I mean? I've always felt like he deserves to be mentioned among the greats. But from my perspective and from what I've seen, from my experience, black people are hesitant to mention him in that list.
I mean, I can't speak on why people leave him off their top 5 list. If you ask people their top 5, they're giving you their top 5.
Right.
And maybe there's a particular reason why they mention some people and not others. But if you only limited it, if it's limited only to 5 people, there's going to be a lot of people that are left off. I mean, I look at it from a historical standpoint. For a long time we had white artists appropriating black culture and taking credit for it. And perhaps the biggest example of this would be somebody like Elvis Presley. When you get to hip hop, it's different because, Elvis and, his manager, Tom Parker, they could appropriate, I think the cat's name's Roy Halladay, if you go look him up. And if you listen to him, it's obvious how Elvis just straight bit my man's style, and a lot of people don't even know who this cat is. And Elvis is, considered an icon. So you could just go and really, steal the culture and turn around and make people think it was yours. You could completely appropriate it and exploit it and get away with it. There was nothing to stop him from doing that. But when you get up to the era of Eminem, I mean, what I think is always interesting is Eminem wouldn't have a career if it wasn't for Dr. Dre. He needed Dre's cosign. He needed, Dre, he needed somebody who had credibility in hip-hop already to co-sign him. And remember, before Eminem came out, most people, when they thought about a white rapper, thought about Vanilla Ice. And Vanilla Ice was whack. And everybody recognized he was whack. So Eminem had to prove to people that he wasn't there just because he was white. So when you listen to Eminem, I mean, the dude can rap. Clearly, he's got skills. There's no debating that. I think what happened at the time, though, what I noticed was a lot of radio stations that weren't playing hip-hop, all of a sudden they started playing Eminem. Now, why weren't you playing this music before? But now that you have, Eminem, you want to play his music. And I think a lot of other people started saying he's the greatest rapper ever during that time. And I'm like, he can rap. He's not the greatest. He can rap. It's just like the NBA. There's been a lot of great players in the NBA. It's not just one or two. There's been a lot over a long period of time. It's been a lot of great MCs. It's not just one or two. So where somebody places him on their list, I think that's personal. To me, I think Eminem can rap. My issue has always been, what is he rapping about? So Chuck D has this line, I don't rhyme for the sake of riddling. When I hear what I hear is somebody rhyming for the sake of riddling. That's cool. But the MCs that I have always appreciated, there was more depth to it. Eminem is really clever and I think very good at what he does. And he's always been cool. I feel like a lot of people outside of him have tried to use him to make points. He didn't do it, but people were using him in his career because he was white to try and say things that he himself wasn't saying. As an MC, I think he's cool. Is he in my top 5? No. Is he in my top 10? No. Doesn't mean he's not a good MC, but I just have different standards when I think about the great MCs, and certainly he's had some great records, but I'm just not willing to say he's the greatest ever.
That's fair. I'm going to start looking at it differently now.
It took him to tell you to look at it different. Been telling you for years.
He expanded on his answer. You just told me, I don't fuck with his music.
It's not, okay, let me simplify this. It's not fucking with his music. Again, he can rap for the sake of rap. He's extremely good at it. But when he does it, it annoys me.
He's a rappity rap dude.
Right. The whole song, Rap God, I'm glad that you can rap really fast and I can kind of sort of understand you. But I'm Busta can do the same thing. Great. You're not impressed. He's a B at everything. He doesn't excel at one thing. He's just really good at putting words together. That's great. Is he going to be in my top 5? No. I'm sorry to tell you that. No. But am I going to say in the sense of influencing hip hop? He'll probably be in that level because without Eminem, Dre doesn't break into those markets. Without Eminem, you're not getting that halftime Super Bowl show. You need that presence for him to finally crack that glass ceiling. Like hip hop has always grown slowly. Like you always like this quote, the Tupac line, the roads are grew from concrete. As much as they have tried to kill hip hop by MTV not playing the videos, by saying that they're a bad influence, that they're destructive to society and children, misogynistic lyric, violence, and everything else to that degree. At this point, 50 years later, it's an influence in pop art, music, fashion, culture. We've almost been like an offshoot of culture, and now we've come like completely ingrained inside of it. You cannot tell from this point forward the culture of this country without it. We've touched every single branch, every tree that falls from it. What makes things fly, what those fashion designers, why they want to mess with hip-hop artists, because we carry the culture. We're the people that people want to watch and see, that they want to look like and act like and be like. Before, they weren't fucking with us. Like we're from the East Coast. Timberland was a construction boot. You just walk around in them heavy-ass boots, right? We made them popular. Now they're coming out with different styles and colors and everything else like that because we wanted it. And then those other kids from, those nice suburban neighborhoods, they're walking around with Timberland. They're wearing fitteds. They're doing the stuff that we did. That's why it matters. And without Eminem, like that part, we could never quite grasp that audience. But once we did, rocket shot through the roof. Because now we're in places that we're never going to be. Like Eminem's on stage with Dr. Dre at the Super Bowl. He's doing, MTV Music Awards and stuff like that. It's not the fact that he's his rapping and things like that. I don't care about that. I care about the fact that you kind of needed that point to. It's like an inflection point. At that point, it becomes something else completely different. Because remember, that Drake's record label wasn't really popping like that. He needed him to kind of keep going. He leaves Death Row. He wants to try something new. The firm flops. His stuff flops. It just doesn't work. He finds his kid. And everything skyrockets from there. So, his rapping ability, great. But what he did in putting us in rooms that we wouldn't think we would generally be, matters more to me.
All right, so before we move on, once and for all, is he hip-hop or is he just a guest?
I mean, I think he's hip-hop. I think the thing is, it's sort of like this, if you watch the NFL, look at the success the New England Patriots have had over the last, 20 years, right? Before Brady left and now Belichick's gone. And I say this jokingly, but I'm serious. Like, the Patriots brought white football players back in the mix. Okay, look at a cat like Julian Edelman. You weren't talking about white wide receivers, in the 90s. I mean, the tight ends, Gronk, always with quarterbacks. But what I'm saying is, they started a whole thing. So now you got Cooper Kupp, right? Who did Eminem inspire? Like, why is there not a whole long line of white rappers since Eminem?
I mean, there's a couple.
There's a couple, right? But it's not like a whole community of white rappers that emerged after Eminem's success.
I think he's influenced more black rappers than white rappers, to be honest.
I would agree. What I'm saying is, if Eminem is a singular figure, right? He didn't create a whole group of dope white MCs. There's been a few, but his success is his success. We could talk about other rappers and their influence, and we can draw a straight line to all the people they influenced and put in the game, or people who tried to be like them or whatever. Eminem is a white guy in a black genre, and because of that, he's going to automatically get attention, and I think he's very good at what he does, considering. I think, though, in terms of moving the culture, in terms of inspiring the culture, in terms of changing the culture, what's different about hip-hop if Eminem doesn't exist? What changes about hip-hop if he doesn't exist? I mean, I think he's great in that sense, but at the end of the day, we're applauding this dude because he's a very, very good rapper. When they decided to start making movies about hip-hop artists, who was the first cat they made a movie about? They made 8 Mile. Does that mean that Eminem's more important than Big? Does that mean Eminem's more important than Pac just because he got the first movie made about him? No, that's the fact that we live in white culture. And the gatekeepers recognized that there was an audience of people that they were willing to pitch a movie to about Eminem that, Big and Pac, that came later.
Damn, I didn't even think of that.
That's buried in American history. That didn't just happen with Eminem. That's before we got to Eminem. Why? Because hip-hop's black. So in that sense, Eminem's the white guy in black culture. But when the larger culture decided to pay attention, it's like we know what to do with this guy. We know how to make money off of him. We know how to identify him and his audience. And previously, that hadn't existed in hip-hop. That doesn't mean he's more important than the legends of hip-hop, the pioneers of hip-hop, who we traditionally celebrate.
I'm going to get off this now. I know that you've been a part of a lot of different documentaries, sports, hip-hop documentaries. I want to ask you, what's your favorite documentary or film that you worked on? Did you work on the Biggie movie, by the way?
Which one? No, I did a Biggie documentary.
The Biggie documentary, all right.
I did a Biggie documentary, but this was back in like 2007, 2008, so it was a while ago. It's called Bigger Than Life, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Dr. Boyd just had the funniest shit because I always see you in documentaries, especially when it comes to like culture and sports and race. And I saw you in the Rick James documentary. And you said how much you hate Super Freak, and I was like, yeah, me too. Like, and when he explained it, he said, I could never quite explain it. I said, I hate this song, but I don't know why. But he was like, when the one he put on is the one the white people jamming to him. I'm like, there we go. There's my answer. He's right. All of Rick James' work, this is the one, like, oh my God, he makes so many great songs. This is the one, y'all. This is it, Super Freak. This little basic ass song of all this talent.
Of all the music he's made, that's the one.
That's just been sampled. That's just been sampled a lot in hip hop, though.
That's right. I mean, that's Hammer. Can't touch this, and other examples too. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been in a lot of documentaries. Of all the documentaries I've been in, The Last Dance. I keep saying to people, The Last Dance, that's like my superhero movie. Because when The Last Dance came out, it was at the beginning of like COVID, the beginning of the pandemic. And, everybody saw it because everybody was pretty much at the crib. And if you think about it, back in the day, people used to watch, everything at the same time. And the only thing that really exists like that now is the Super Bowl, that everybody watches it at the same time with streaming and everything. So because of COVID, people were watching The Last Dance and, it was hugely popular. And I had the first 2 episodes. I think the first episode I'm in is the 3rd episode. Mm-hmm. But the first episode, I have people, I know who are like, are you watching this? Like, of course I'm watching it. And they're like, you should be in this. And I didn't even say anything. And then the 3rd episode hit. And so, I'm in LA, I'm on West Coast time. So it aired first on the East Coast. And I go to Twitter and, my timeline on Twitter just blown up. But it's not coming off for 3 more hours, in LA. And I had kind of forgotten, to be honest with you. And I'm like, oh, I must be in this episode because they didn't tell me before which episode I was in. And so from that point forward, the rest of the series, what I would do is I would just go, it was Twitter at the time. I would just go to Twitter and see what people were saying on Twitter. And then I would watch the actual episode later on that night. But, Last Dance was a lot of fun. I've been in so many documentaries. They start to run together at a certain point. One of the things. Too, right? Say that again. I'm sorry.
The Wood.
Yeah, I co-wrote and produced The Wood. I mean, that was back in '99. So add that to the books and the documentaries. I did a few things here and there. But the documentaries, people know me from the documentaries because I've been in so many of them. And actually, what I'm kind of focused on now is adapting the book Rappers Deluxe into a documentary series because I wrote it with that in mind. I mean, documentaries are so popular now, and to be able to tell the story of the book through a documentary would be very cool. So that's something I'm looking into now as well.
Start pitching it to some networks and stuff like that?
Yeah. I've been having conversations. It's hard out here in Hollywood trying to do it, and I want to do it right, and there's a certain way I want to do it. And, because honestly, I've been in all these documentaries, and, I appreciate people who reach out and want to interview me. I appreciate that a great deal. But in some ways, I feel like, I remember when Snoop had The Last Meal, and somebody asked him what the title meant. He goes, people been eating off of me.
It's the last something you eat off of me.
I got, this is the last meal. I got to eat off myself. And so, much love. I'm very grateful. But I've been giving people all this flavor in these documentaries for all these years. I got to do my own thing. It's time for me to transition. And I'm going to still do documentaries if people will have me. But what I'm trying to put together with the book and the documentary series associated with that, I'm going to be much more prominent. I'm going to be much more visible. I'm going to be your on-screen host and guide as opposed to, one amongst many. It's going to be the doctor's perspective. And so that's what I'm trying to put together. And, if somebody's like down with that and they want to finance that, then cool. But, I'm not trying to do it in the way that, it might have been done traditionally. I have a whole different approach that I've thought out, that I planned as I was writing the book. I wrote the book with a documentary series in mind. So hopefully, that'll come to pass. And in the process, we seeing what's out there and seeing what we can do in terms of, bringing this to the people. And so you'll have the book, and then hopefully, at some point you'll have a documentary series as well.
Yeah, I want to ask you, of all the hats that you wear, as a writer, as a public speaker, an educator, which is your favorite of all the hats that you wear?
Wow, that's a good question.
Which one are you most passionate about?
I mean, I am somebody who went to graduate school because I wanted a PhD, and the reason I wanted a PhD was because when I was a kid, I heard how people in the media talked about Dr. J. And Dr. J didn't have no PhD, and he wasn't no doctor. But when I was growing up in the 70s, you didn't necessarily find a black man being discussed with respect. They put a lot of respect on Dr. J's name, so when I was a kid, I remember saying, I want to be Dr. B, and I want people to put respect on my name the way they put respect on his. And so my idea was, do this PhD thing, become a professor at a prominent university, and that would be my base. And from that base, I could write The Wood, I could write books, I could appear in documentaries, I could consult, I could do all these things. And so, I don't know if one is my favorite or another. I've been a professor for a long time. Obviously, I like to talk. I like being interviewed, I like the freedom I have to kind of move through and connect with and participate in the culture. Not just observe it, but participate in it. And so, at different times, I like different aspects of it. I can change those hats with ease. But I'm a creative person. I think a lot of people, when they think about professors, they have a misunderstanding. I'm not a teacher. I've never been a teacher. I'm a professor. There's a difference. But I like to describe myself and what I do. I'm a creative intellectual. That's how I describe it. And so being able to write books and do movies and make documentary appearances. To me, you have to have all that coupled with, being a professor and endowed chair at a major university. So it's really the combination, of all that. We form like Voltron, you know what I'm saying? You bring all those pieces together and, the sum.
Some Wu-Tang reference.
Yeah, for sure. The sum bigger than its part. So that's kind of how I approach it, I guess. All those hats are very comfortable. At various times, I like wearing different hats, but I like having all those hats available to me. That's what's really important.
All right, I mean, we know the answer to this question, but it begs just to ask it. Is it safe to say that hip-hop is your first love?
In terms of culture, you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I am hip-hop. You know what I'm saying? I am hip-hop. So that's like, is loving yourself. Like, are you your first love? Yeah, I love me some me, So, yeah, I love hip-hop. I love jazz too, but nobody's really into jazz no more. So I got a handful of friends I could talk to about it. But, it's not popular. Hip-hop, that's who I am. I mean, so, yeah, I mean, I couldn't do what I'm doing without hip-hop. And so it's definitely my first, second, third, fourth, and fifth love. But I love a lot of things. I love movies, you know what I'm saying? I love fashion. I love art. I pay attention to politics. I mean, so again, it's like the previous question. To me, hip-hop ties all this together. And that's really honestly what my book is about how all these different things tied together are hip-hop. Like, we know the music, but, it's also sports. It's also, I'm really into contemporary art. Like, it's also art. Like, it's also fashion. It's all those things. So I guess if we think about hip-hop in the broadest sense, I would definitely say that's a love.
All right, before we wrap this up, if you don't mind, I got a couple of fan questions that were submitted.
Certainly.
We have one on X, a.k.a. Twitter. Shout out to Stiley. Shout out to the Barbershop group chat. Because he said, in reference to you, he said that his resume is so dope. I always loved his NWA commentary and how this music was designed to be gritty enough to make you squirm. I actually like that quote. But his question is up there. He says, and thinking kind of broad here, but how he fell in love with hip-hop and where he sees it could evolve to next. And maybe expand on how black music evolves so progressively and transcends in such amazing ways.
I think when I was in high school and I heard rappers Deluxe, it was like somebody was speaking my language. Like, imagine if you were in a foreign country and they don't speak English, and then all of a sudden from across the way you hear somebody speak English. That's going to feel real significant to you, Somebody speaks your language. Like, I'm not the only one here speaking this language. And so when I heard, Rappers Delight and, all that early hip-hop, this is what I was saying to you earlier. When I heard DMC, it's like that. Everybody I knew in college had Thriller or 1999 or both. Mm-hmm. And, I'm the kind of dude, if everybody else is going right, I'm going to go left. That's just who I am. So it's like, okay, you in the Prince of Michael, but then DMC is like, it's not Michael Jackson and this is not Thriller. So that's what I was repping. And I was repping it precisely because everybody else wasn't repping it. That's the era I come from. So falling in love with hip-hop, from the time I first experienced it, which is when the first needle dropped, but hip-hop is, to me, like a continuation. I mentioned jazz, all the great, R&B, soul music from the 70s, bebop jazz before that, neo soul. I mean, I like great music. You know what I'm saying? And if it's great if it's, something created by somebody substantive, then, I'll dig it and I'll vibe on it. So, I've been with hip hop from the very beginning, from the first time I heard it. And I think the evolution of hip hop and black music in general is because, a standard was set a long time ago. I mean, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Louis Armstrong, these guys were operating at a very high level. Miles Davis tells stories about, in his era, in the early days, like they would have like what we might now call open mic nights, and, jazz musicians would get up and play their instrument. And Miles said if you got up on the bandstand and you were bullshitting, you would get your ass kicked. Like literally, like dudes would like take you outside and whip your ass for wasting their time. I mean, so, we've had these standards for a very long time, and then you get to hip hop. It's like if you get on the mic and you whack, like you might have to answer for that. I mean, that's the culture, that's the tradition. And so anything that has that kind of competitive component and, forces people to push creativity to the highest level, the results are often good. And I appreciate that and celebrate it and promote it and write about it. And, hopefully we'll continue to see things operate at that level.
You mentioned Run DMC. Were you in the building by any chance for the Hip Hop 50 at Yankee Stadium? Because I was there, and they had me till 2 in the morning waiting for Run DMC to come out because they closed the show. And I was there for 8 hours.
Was it cool?
It was the best shit. I told Ann, it was the best shit I've ever been to.
Bruh.
But the doors opened up at 6, and we was there till 2 in the morning. But everybody was there. It was the most diverse shit I had ever seen.
I remember seeing all the pictures and everything, videos on social media.
Yeah, look ahead, my man. Look, they were showing that on YouTube. I'm not staying up 2 o'clock in the morning for nobody. I watched it all right there. I can rewind it and replay it. You can buy that ticket, sit in Yankee Stadium all you want for 8 hours. That's a job shift. I ain't doing that. I just watched the replay. I saw everything you saw from the comfort of my bedroom. So I'm glad you enjoyed, but good for you.
And one last fan question. Shout out to Shakir. For some reason, and going back to this white rapper conversation, he wants to know, in your opinion, is Action Bronson better than Eminem?
I think Action Bronson is more of a character than a rapper.
The chef.
I mean, he's a cool character. I mean, I even give a cat like Jack Harlow some props. But I mean, in terms of rhyming, I don't think any of them dudes can touch Eminem. In terms of rhyming, no. So I'd go with Eminem on that.
All right, and this is the grand finale. We always ask all our guests this.
Whoa. You always ask this.
Well, I asked.
You did. There you go.
And since you're a hip-hop and sports connoisseur, we're going to do it 2 parts. Your top 5. We're going to start with your top 5 basketball players.
Now, are we saying my favorite players or the best of all time?
Yours.
In your opinion, the top 5 best players, all around best players of all time, dead or alive.
Okay. Order, and you want them in order or you just want 5?
I mean, if you can put them in order, but if not, then just 5.
Okay. I would say this is in no particular order. You could rank them. You could rank them how you choose. But what I often say when people ask me this about basketball is, different players played in different eras under different circumstances. So it's really hard to compare.
Different rules, too.
Different rules. Yeah, that's what I mean when I say different circumstances. I mean, contemporary players don't have to worry about being in a hotel and going to get something to eat, and they say we don't serve black people. You got to factor that in also. A lot of the OGs had to deal with that,
They had second jobs.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So I would say, as I say, this is not in order, but top 5, I would say Mike, Bill Russell, Kareem, Wilt, was that 4? Yep. And Magic.
No LeBron. Wow.
Now let me put a asterisk by LeBron. The only reason I won't say LeBron now is he's still playing. Now, by the time he gets through playing, if you ask me that same question then, he'll be on the list, which means I'm going to have to drop somebody. But I'm not. The only reason I'm not saying LeBron now is we don't know how much more LeBron's going to accomplish before he's done, right? None of us expected LeBron to be the leading scorer while he's still playing because LeBron never had the reputation as a scorer, right? I mean, and now he's the leading scorer in history and he's still playing. So no diss to LeBron. It's just that while he's still playing, I'm going to put him in reserve. But if we had the same conversation, once he retires, he will automatically be on the list, which means I'm going to have to drop somebody. And the person I'm going to drop is going to either be Wilt or Magic. But for now, that's who I'll go with, those 5.
And finally, your top 5 MCs of all time.
Okay, so I have what I call it the Godhead. Big, Jay, and Nas. That's the Godhead to me, those 3. The next 2, I would say Ice Cube and Chuck D. And if you gave me a bonus, I'd throw in cats like Scarface and Big Daddy Kane.
Is Ice Cube a West Coast bias thing?
No. I mean, if you want to talk about like conscious, like serious, like political hip hop back in the day, I mean, Ice Cube had bars, man, and it was substantive. And the thing Ice Cube was saying, just was deep. And with the exception of Chuck D, nobody else was really coming with that political depth the way Ice Cube was. So that's why I, rep Ice Cube. I mean, if we're talking about style, like I got to give Snoop props. The thing is, it's just so many great rappers. Like, inevitably when you do that, you're going to leave people off. Who are cool. But Big J and Nas, those are my like top 3 dudes. Again,
3-headed monster right there.
Yeah, order that as you choose, and then give me Scarface and Kane and Chuck D and Cube, and I mean I like J. Cole and Drake a lot now. I like Wu. Back in the day, I like Brand Nubian. I mean, there's been so many great MCs that it feels almost like you slighting somebody when you come up with a list. Because inevitably you leave somebody off and people think you don't like them. It's not that. It's just there's only enough room on the list for so many people. But those are some of the names that have always meant a whole lot to me and whose music I still listen to this day.
Yeah, it just becomes like basketball. You have your list, but then you got to kind of break it down, like who are the best shooters of all time, who are the best dunkers of all time, who's the most creative, who got the best handle. Like hip-hop's the same way. Like you got certain guys at the top, but there's certain people who do certain things in an extreme way. Like Kyrie Irving's not going to be anybody's top 100, but a ball handler, he might be 1 or 2. Is kind of how you look at it. Just hip-hop the same way. List a list, but just sometimes you got to categorize and make sure it makes sense to what you're talking about.
I think the thing about both ball and hip-hop is that, there's just been so many people who are great at what they do that I agree with you. I mean, you talk about ball handlers, like I always say to people, check out Marcus Haynes. And I say that and I get a strange look. I'm like, Marcus Haynes, who played for the Harlem Globetrotters, and we just talking about ball handling. Marcus Haynes, to me, that's the greatest ball handler ever. And when people talk about ball handlers, they never mention Marcus Haynes, right? But I look at Kyrie, I mean, he's real nice with it. I'm from Detroit, so, I got to give a big shout out to Isaiah.
Zeke.
As a ball handler, like, come on, man. And then, I'm Bad Boys, my guy Joe D, Isaiah. I mean, those were just great teams. Young Rodman, before he started, like,
going crazy. Okay. I got you.
So again, the reason I feel like we love the NBA and the reason we love hip hop is because it's not like there's just 1 or 2 guys. There's so many guys some have been great at a lot of things, some have been great at, maybe one thing specifically. I agree with you. Like, are we talking greatest shooters? Are we talking greatest rebounders? greatest defenders? Are we talking most skilled? I mean, you look at these dudes now, they can do 5 or 6 different things. Back in the day, you were expected to do one thing. You know, I think about a cat like Bernard King. I mean, I've seen so many great ballers like throughout the course of my life. Dr. J, who I feel like people forget about today, how great Dr. J was. The game, both in hip hop and basketball, has had a lot of, you know, great individuals. And so it's hard to put it on a list because inevitably you end up leaving somebody off. And that's unfortunate, but that's why I like talking about the magnitude, the whole of it, because you want to give all these guys their props who deserve it.
Dr. Boyd, thank you for coming on, man. We appreciate you. We're privileged to have you on the show. Tell the people where they can find you and follow you, where they can get your book.
Hey, you know, Dr. Todd Boyd, I'm always hanging around on the gram, so, you know, you can find me on Instagram. You know, the book, Rappers Deluxe, you know, you need that in your life. I'm telling you, cop that. If you want to go to Fight On, the publisher, fighton.com. You want to go to Amazon. You want to go to, you know, Barnes and Nobles. You know, I think they got us up in Urban Outfitters. Like, we're everywhere with this. We're global with it, you know. You know, watch out, you know, when you're checking for the documentaries. You never know where I might pop up. You never know where you might see me. So just keep your eyes open and appreciate, you know, the opportunity to be on the show and chop it up with you guys and everybody listening. You know, appreciate the love, you know, the shout outs. I see people in the airport shouting me out. Like, you know, I love it. I appreciate all of it. And I'm just out here trying to rep this culture and promote this book and, you know, try to do it at a high level. That's always been my thing. So, you know, as I say, appreciate you and thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Boyd. Thank you for tuning in. Shout out to the Culture Crew. Till next time, peace.